Baron Bastani, I'll start with you on this one. Obviously, someone has been arrested in that particular case, so I can't go too much into the ins and outs of this one when it comes to a debate. But more broadly, what do you think's going on? Because young people now, whether it's sharp implements, whether it's knives, whatever, it certainly feels that there seems to be more of this stuff around, doesn't it?
Well, there's certainly an issue in knife crime generally. We know that in particular with big cities. Mm-hmm. I have to say, though, and this is obviously an appalling incident, multiple people have been attacked. Nobody, fortunately, is looking at life-threatening injuries right now. I mean, I was growing up only, 30 years ago, and this sort of thing was happening. And the idea that somehow children have become reprobates overnight, I remember the 90s, the late 90s, the early 2000s, and there were stories of teachers, quite unfortunately and unforgivably, frankly, being assaulted by children. So this isn't new, I don't think. I think we need a fundamental rethink around the kind of culture within which children are raised. I would like to see smartphones banned from schools, let alone kids stabbing people. I don't think it's necessarily new.
When you say smartphones banned from schools, do you mean, i.e. kids just can't take them to school, or do you mean literally there should be a sales ban, i.e. you can't sell a smartphone to a child?
Prohibiting the sale of
obviously to their parents, you know what I mean.
Prohibiting the sale of smartphones strikes me as quite hard.
Because that's what a lot of parents are campaigning for, to make it illegal for kids to actually have smartphones.
Whereas there are many pilots where schools literally don't let the children have phones on their person in the school. That's happened. They've been very successful. Sweden's just done it. They had a pilot, very effective. And do you know what kids benefit the most?
What?
Working class kids. The poorest kids benefit the most because they're the ones on this stuff the most. Their concentration is savage the most. So I think we need a fundamental rethink about the culture we raise children in this country. Absolutely. But I would just say, let's take pause for a moment. Is this particularly new? Look, I'm 40 years old. Awful, dreadful things were happening to teachers when I was growing up, not that long ago. So
the worst thing that ever happened to teachers when I was at school, I remember, I shouldn't laugh because it was awful, I remember a supply teacher actually getting locked in a cupboard by one of my fellow classmates. Obviously nothing to do with me. I certainly don't remember this kind of level of violence meted out towards teachers. But what do you make to all of this? I mean, there was a little lad yesterday, he was only about 14 or 15, and he got knifed in front of all of his classmates and stuff like that. It's shocking, isn't it?
I think the problem there's been zero tolerance. I personally think that the first time, whether it's a youth, if we say we're looking at youth, say we're looking at that sort of age group, I think, and anybody older, I think if you are caught carrying a knife, an offensive weapon, because it's not just a machete, don't forget you can go into your mum's kitchen and there's a drawer full of knives, so you can't stop them, for example. You can't say, well, they can't buy them on the internet. Because they don't need to, frankly. So a lot of these machetes and things, they'll be all given around, they'll be all in the sort of black economy, and the gangs hold them. I think we've been too soft on all of this. I think it's the wrong... I think the wrong direction is to say, well, of course, it's a lot of, quite working class kids, whatever. That's can't be an excuse. This has become endemic, and it has been over the last 30 years. We saw, teachers being murdered in London, and we've seen the rise in crime, also in America, and gun crime as well, because it's easy for them to get guns. So my personal view is, if you are caught with a knife, I think you should be detained. I think we need to have things like youth detention centres. I don't think community, a community... if they're going out to, go and do some community service for 20 hours, I don't think anything like that works. And unless we have some sort of zero tolerance...
So first offence beyond bars, essentially.
Yeah.
Is that, would you agree with that, Aaron?
I don't know. I'm not a young offenders kind of professional. What I would say is we have very high rates of reoffending in this country, and I would be curious as to why that is the case. But first offence, I think everybody deserves a second chance generally. But obviously, if you do something appalling, that doesn't hold, obviously.
Yeah, but we can't, because this is escalating. It doesn't stop. There doesn't seem to be I'd like somebody to tell me what the deterrent is, because the slap on the wrist is not working. A lot of it is linked to some of these county lines, and we know a lot of it's also linked, not necessarily this case, we're not talking about the one today, but a lot of these cases around London and with the kids, we know that the sort of drugs lords get hold of them. And then, of course, for their protection, probably they're given knives and all these sorts of things. So it's also trying to break all of that down. So, again, it's raising this whole thing. We have to have a concept here that is zero tolerance. The public and children, we can't allow this to keep escalating because it's just getting out of hand. We need real tough,
we've got
hard
zero
policing.
tolerance. We don't have a zero tolerance approach for anything.
Well, this is why I'm saying...
Literally anything. So, I mean, chance will be a fine thing, but, I mean, we can't even have a zero tolerance for things like shoplifting.
Oh, well, that's another issue we were thinking of talking about. I mean, people have to... We know what the law is. We have a rule of law. Sometimes people do go along the wrong path and we don't want to punish them for the rest of their lives. But when we're talking about life-threatening, which is what this is, without any shadow of a doubt, we really have to take a much tougher approach on this. And what we're doing at the moment, where they're being let off the hook, they're back in the community, and... you know, so it's wider, and they also need to be focusing on those that are encouraging the kids to carry these weapons.
One of my viewers, Paul, has got in touch and said, Jules, the problem here is that all of this is not shocking anymore.
No.
I mean, you say no. Do you not find that? Because I found today's episode very shocking.
It is shocking, but the thing is, there was in Liverpool, where obviously I'm from. Remember, there were the kids in the some kids had a little bit of an altercation and a 12-year-old girl ended up being stabbed in the neck. I mean, and died. You know, this is all the time, but I'm only saying it's not shocking because it's happening so frequently these days, people aren't generally shocked. When we were younger, if you look at 30, 40 years ago, if somebody was stabbed, it was often headline news. You know, on the main broadcasters.
But what I would say is I think a lot of it is social media, in so much as I remember...
TikTok.
I remember being a kid, big shout-out to Martin Kemp Welsh School in Bournemouth, which I didn't go to. I went to the grammar school, and if I didn't get into the grammar school, I would have gone to Kemp Welsh. And Kemp Welsh would repeatedly have these horror stories of people being, you know, stabbed with knives in the canteen, or a teacher was assaulted with a broken chair, and my mum was like, we have to make sure you do not go to that school. So it's not that new. I think, you know, if you're comparing today to, say, to the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s, huge difference. To the early 2000s, I don't think, and we agree on that. So I think the idea that, you know, in the last 5 to 10 years something has snapped, I don't think that's.
Let me ask you, a couple of viewers have got in touch. There's a general theme here, because Philip says, on a more general point, Michelle, in Wales, you can't even smack your own child when they're being naughty. Yeah. Teachers are now afraid to even look at children in the wrong way. Hence, you've got no discipline in schools. And Ian says, why is there not a broader discussion when you get to these kind of points about the reintroduction of corporal punishment? Is that what we're missing? Like, that people, because people are not physically able to chastise their child? I mean, is that really the root of it?
Well, I'm from a generation, and we did get a slap. You know, I'm not talking about punching or whatever, but you certainly got a slap on the hand or something like that if you were sticking your hand in the fire. And so I'm not suggesting that, but the thing is, it's like going from one extreme to the other. 1 minute there's a great deal of discipline, and there was when I was growing up, and then the pendulum, I think, has swung too far the other way. So it's not about some physical punishment necessarily, but I just think, as a general rule, kids very often know they can get away with it because there isn't a punishment at the end of the day. The parents also need to take responsibility, frankly, and I think there are too many parents, or you know, they may be just allowing these things to happen, or have mobile phones 20 hours a day looking at this rubbish on here. And they've got to take responsibility too, because I just think it's a great tragedy and we could do without it.
Very quickly, your thoughts on those viewer comments?
I would say, actually, my biggest misgiving about all of this is when parents tell teachers they're wrong. I remember growing up and at school, and if I moaned and said the teacher had done something bad, or I had been hard done by at school, my dad and mum would say, well, you're the kid, you're wrong, they're right. Now, that's not always a healthy attitude.
Yes, it is.
But not always. Just sometimes the kid is right.
Most of the time.
Yeah, but it's relatively productive. And I feel really sorry for teachers now if they try to discipline children, not physically, but just trying to maintain some kind of authoritative relationship with them, and that's undermined by the parents. That, for me, is a bigger problem than a lack of corporal punishment or whatever. I
vaguely remember a school teacher chucking a blackboard rubber down the classroom. But you can't call it a blackboard anymore. Never mind lobbing a rubber that way, can you?